Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The Movie Podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. Episode 99 with episode 100 just around the corner. This week, I bring 4 brand new reviews with all now playing in theaters. This week on the show, they are higher, further, faster, together in The Marvels. An intimate look into the relationship between Priscilla and Elvis in Priscilla. A family secret is uncovered that catapults an estranged mother and daughter into the exploration of the past in the Persian version. And finally, Meg Ryan and David Duchovny missed their connection in the most accurate tagline on the show to date in What Happens Later. We have a big show to cover, so let's jump right into it. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows to watch, a roar and a bursting of flame. The Movie Wire Podcast. You need people like me.
Podcast for hot and trending movies.
The Wire.
And here we go.
Carol Danvers gets her powers entangled with those of Kamala Khan and Monica Rambeau, forcing them to work together to save the universe in this non-spoiler review of The Marvels.
Carol Danvers, prodigal child of the Milky Way.
Nick Fury, my favorite one-eyed man of intrigue.
How goes it out there?
Cold, no air, space.
Captain Marvel, the Annihilator. You took everything from me. And now I'm returning the favor.
What is happening to me? She's entangled our light-based powers.
So we switch places whenever we use them.
Strong theory.
You can absorb light.
I can see it.
And Kamala...
Who's Kamala?
Hi.
She can turn light into physical matter, which I have never heard of.
I could totally show you.
No!
Targeting every planet we call home. I would never choose to bring anybody into this.
You are not the only thing standing between this and the universe.
Oh my god, we're a team.
Higher.
Further. Faster.
Can you?
I got it.
Now, there was a moment in The Marvels where we have a civilization that communicates through song. And just song. Like our heroes just walked into a musical, but for a planet and a civilization that just surrounds their culture around song and music, they absolutely suck at musicals. If you're going to make a planet that sings and dances, at least make this memorable. This is the point in the film I had to ask myself, was this written at Marvel Studios' Christmas party around 1 in the morning when the entire studio was just beyond plastered? Is this the point where Marvel Studios just throws their hands up in the air and says, "F this phase of Marvel movies because nothing is going right"? Or is it an egotistical overconfidence that writers think, hey, I'm gonna do my vision and because it's Marvel, people will buy a ticket? Even though the intent will never be clear, based on the complete shift in tone, humor, and character silliness, along with de-evolving our characters to mere slapstick props, I'm gonna say it's a mixture of all of the above. The feel and overlaying tone feels like it was intended as a straight-to-Disney Plus exclusive, almost that of a superhero sitcom. The only thing missing was a laugh track in the background. The Marvels brings back Captain Marvel, played once again by Brie Larson, Tiona Paris as Monica Rambeau, and Kamala Khan as Miss Marvel from the Disney Plus series Miss Marvel, played by Iman Vellani, along with Nick Fury, once again played by Samuel L. Jackson, who is now in space. I've been waiting for a movie appropriate enough to find a reason for Samuel L. Jackson to take one of his repeat roles into space. That wasn't Star Wars. I was hoping for Shaft in space, but instead I get Nick Fury. And our Nick Fury character in this just feels thrown in just to kind of get the plot going. It's used more as just comic relief and shows how unbalanced these movies have become when it comes to vision, especially when we have different writers write an interpretation of the character in each movie. And the interpretation that writers Nia DaCosta from our Candyman remake, WandaVision's Megan McDonnell, and Loki's Alyssa Karasik create is something that feels like a miniseries that really should have been on Disney Plus or an added season of the Miss Marvel TV show. These writers' interpretation and story are just plain bonkers, but they do add an element of just fun factor. Now, when it comes to the story of the Marvels, to keep it simple without spoilers, the three superhumans share different aspects of the power they share, and when they each use their superpower at the same time, they switch places and must go up against a villain that is so generic and so uninteresting that during the viewing, I didn't even bother to take any notation on her character or motivations. I actually had to look her up after the movie, even to the point she is so irrelevant, her only motivation is creating situations to make our trio of superheroes show up and show off their fancy CGI effects. Oh, by the way, her name is Darvin, played by Zaw Ashton, if you even care to know. Now, there are a lot of elements of fun that we can kind of cherry pick out of the Marvels, most of which come from Kamala Khan / Miss Marvel, again played by Iman Vellani, who steals the show here. And this is one thing the writers do get right, is giving her a majority of the screen time. Our writer and director Nia DaCosta does get this element right, is utilizing her on-screen likability to ensure she gets a majority of the shots, to really support the fun factor and the idea of what the Marvels are really desperately trying to accomplish. Which, if I were to assume, with the Guardians of the Galaxy movies out, Thor out, Ant-Man out for a while, this was intended to be the new comedy relief storyline to lighten the future strings of the Marvel movies. And why all the comedy has to come from outer space? You can check out my review of Dick's the Musical that I briefly cover on how safe Hollywood has become in that review. Because I wouldn't want to use a comedy down here either, it sucks. But there are moments in the Marvels that gave me a brief chuckle. There were elements that were entertaining, but then we have the story that's completely lame. Characters that are either completely uninteresting or characters that are written way over the top, with the exception of our Miss Marvel character. And at times, there are certain moments that she can even be a little too much. The Marvels throw every possible element to try and get the audience to really like them, to the point of annoyance and mental exhaustion. From happy musical planets, desperate attempts at humor, a lighter tone, overused special effects, to even the use of a ton of little kittens. Now, who can hate a movie full of cute, cuddly kittens?
Hello, dear Movie Wire listener. This is Dan from Casting Views. I just needed to state that, for the record, Justin is currently raising his hand. You may continue, Justin.
Only in this movie. The Marvels is just a silly Saturday morning CGI-filled cartoon that confuses the Marvel Cinematic Universe even more on what the hell it's doing with its life. The Marvels could have been enjoyable, silly fun in superhero movies of the standards of the 90s, but all the ideas just don't land the way I think our filmmakers envisioned it. The absolute disappointing thing about the Marvels is how the filmmakers don't take our characters' development seriously from previous films. One of the most frustrating things for me and disappointing things about the Marvels is how the filmmakers don't take our character development seriously from previous films and tie it together in this one. For example, we take our Nick Fury character, again played by Samuel L. Jackson, who's used to present the plot where the story's gonna go, and then the movie just plops him down and treats him like a prop that tells jokes during the rest of the movie. Even though at this point in time, I would think that this would be a very damaged man based on what he has gone through in the previous movies. The Marvels is filled with a lot of these small details that the film just ignores from previous films and just wants to create their own version of the character, and it doesn't work here, nor does it make sense. I was almost waiting for a moment where Arnold Schwarzenegger pops out as Mr. Freeze and tells our characters to have an iced day. At times, the movie can't go full Batman and Robin. What Batman and Robin was to DC movies, the Marvels is to Marvel, just not as extremely bad, because I will give the Marvels 3 bits of credit. 1, Velity is fantastic. 2, the end credit scenes is fantastic. And 3, I didn't walk out. I didn't walk out from utter annoyance and anger. So the Marvels has that going for it. The Marvels is one of the weakest of the Marvel entries, but I will give it some credit. It is at least entertaining. I'm giving the Marvels 2 stars. When a large Iranian-American family gathers, a family secret is uncovered that catapults the estranged mother and daughter into an exploration of the past and discover they are more alike than they know. In the Persian version.
My mother is an ultra-successful immigrant businesswoman.
The mortgage is going to be less than your rent.
You must be joking.
Oh, I never joke about business, Mrs. Khan.
She was not one to take no for an answer.
Amazing, and congratulations.
No one ever gave her the memo that Muslim women were supposed to be passive good girls. This is my family in a nutshell. The disco king, the troublemaker, JFK Jr. minus the plane crash, the brainiac, the goth, the hippie, the greaser, and the metrosexual. And me. Oh my God, I love drag queens.
Oh no, I'm an actor.
You're so beautiful until you talk.
Where's Layla? God knows.
And my dad's about to get a heart.
Just immediate family, please.
These aren't even all of my siblings. They're like a litter of cats.
Usually, the stronger kittens eat the weaker ones.
فکر می‌کنیم ما آدم خوریم؟
I have your test results. You are pregnant.
I didn't even get knocked up from a one-night stand.
You're pregnant by a gay guy?
I'm not gay.
You knocked up my gay sister.
I'm still gay. I just happened to get pregnant.
You weren't gay on Halloween.
If you ever wonder what it's like running into your ex when you look like
Layla?
Elena, hi. How are you?
Evidently better than you.
Ever since you were a kid, there was not one rule you did not want to break.
Layla, sweatpants.
It's too hot.
Don't be a bad Muslim.
My daughter plays basketball and my son is a cheerleader.
So you're binge eating when you're pregnant, right?
بهشون به سلامتی که عروسی میکنن. سوال خوبیه.
What are you doing later tonight?
How do you say goodbye in Persian?
خفشو.
خفشو, everybody. خفشو.
We were the all-American family. Just trust me on this.
We're looking for Layla Jam supporter. She's in Labour. Do you know which room she's in?
Is anyone of you the father?
I'm the father.
Oh, Lord.
As the synopsis of the film just so simply states that this is a story that deep dives into a mother and daughter's relationship, utilizing flashbacks from the past to attempt to connect the dots between the two. This is a movie that is much more complex than the synopsis states, and much more complex. The problem I have with this synopsis is the final 8 words, which were discovered that they are more alike than they know. This is a standard family conflict synopsis line that I have seen in films like comedies, family comedies, and I've seen it more times than I can count. This line almost undersells the film when it comes to the multiple layers of the Persian version, but also places my biggest problem with the film in the spotlight. The Persian version is written and directed by Mariam Kashavars, who wrote and directed a couple films that flew under the radar that are actually quite underrated. And that's 2018's Viper Club starring Susan Sarandon and the intriguing film Circumstance from 2011. The Persian version is a movie that Kashavars creates a lot of layers and messaging with a lot of depth and substance to its characters, and at times this can be the kryptonite for the way she envisions the way her story is being told. The story surrounds itself around the relationship of our Iranian-American family with our mother and daughter at the center stage. with our stern mother Shireen, played by Nisha Noor, and her rebellious daughter Leela, played by Layla Mohammadi, who is the only girl of 9 children. Leela is an aspiring filmmaker who is also a lesbian, which some of her family members just don't agree with. And when she gets out of a relationship, she decides to have a one-night stand with Maximilian, played by Tom Byrne, who is playing in the stage show of Hedwig and the Angry Inch. The one-night stand leads to Leela with an unexpected pregnancy. Now, some of the best moments and the most memorable moments in the Persian version is surrounding scenes that include our big Persian American family. It has heart, it has humor, it also has some unresolved feelings by the end of the movie where we feel that we just wanted more. The Persian version splits this movie between past and present. The past from Leela shows the demand and expectation from her family's culture and how she has to culturally struggle between wanting to do what would be seen as a normal American kid, but pleasing her mother being the only other girl in the family. The flashbacks are interesting, but at times it can overstay their welcome, especially after getting a taste and introduction to Leela's family. Because when we are with our family, it's like being invited to the person you're dating. You show up and you're a nervous wreck, but then you end up having a lot of fun and you feel like you're part of the family. The feels that the Persian version offer the audience is a wholesome one. But when we get into the flashbacks, especially when we get into the sneak peek of our young Shireen, we can understand the pain, the scandal, hardship, and emotional pain that made her the way she is. When we flash back to Shireen, we get 13-year-old Shireen, played by Kamad Shafasiyabet. This takes up a majority of the second half of the movie, where she meets her current husband, who was 22 at the time of their marriage. Now, even though some might find this culturally interesting, at times it actually is emotionally heartbreaking. And writer-director Keshavars, I can tell, wanted to spend a big chunk of the time to have viewers understand the point of view of Shireen, on how she grew into the person that she is. She's raising 9 kids, has to be the main provider of the house. Holistically, we can see Shireen struggle, but how Keshavars connects the dots by the end isn't really clear on what she's trying to prove, especially within the mother-daughter relationship. I could feel what Keshavars was really shooting for with the numerous flashbacks and the incredibly overused narration of the story by Layla throughout the movie, but if it takes these long drawn-out flashbacks and overused narration to have the director and writers explain their thoughts and feelings, then that means the messaging isn't clear. That's a writing problem. But the Persian version isn't without its heart. By the end of the film, what really builds is a mix of forced emotion from the medical conflict, the mother-daughter relationship, and a lot of conflicts that are crescendoing from the flashbacks, and at the same time, we get some truly great performances and on-screen likability. This is an all-over-the-place blend, but at the end of the day, is it effective? Do we get an emotional reaction at the end? The answer is yes, we do, especially with our mother and daughter by the end of it. To an extent, I knew it was forced emotion, but I couldn't help but get a little emotional. The biggest forte on this movie that Keshavars is successful in is a written character of Mother Shireen, who does say some pretty harsh things that we want to hate her. We want to hate her so bad for the things she says, but we find it hard to dislike her as a person. And this is also due to the fantastic performance by Noor. As a viewer, I didn't agree with Shireen's viewpoint, nor the things she says, but I did respect her dedication to her family values and culture. And the movie does paint a picture of how hard it is for Shireen to adapt to our culture, especially raising kids in an American culture, as they are taught young, well, she isn't as lucky as she came to America as an adult. Keshavars does throw in some fascinating cultural things and cultural differences and how this Iranian family has to balance this. There is a fascinating level of emotional balance that Keshavars brings to the table when it comes to how our characters balance each other out. And if I were to be fair, even though the messaging isn't clear in how Keshavars wanted to connect the dots to the mother and daughter relationship, she is successful with the thanks and help from our performances to having me really care about the outcome of our family, along with how the movie was going to solve the relationship between Leela and Shireen. Some viewers may not be happy with the subtle outcome of the film, but many will find it hard not to shed a slight tear, especially with cleverly placed vehicles earlier in the movie to really hit the viewer in the emotional gut. Those of us with kids will even be hit harder. But not only that, but the feeling of not wanting to disappoint our families or parents. The movie banks on these emotions when we have Leila and Shireen on screen together. The Persian version is an effective emotional ride that you may have to work and have patience with to get to the climax to find it effective. Even though the messaging takes a backseat to how Keshavars wants the viewer to understand the relationship, I think Keshavars is so vague on the point she wants to prove that we as a viewer takes our own inner emotions to fill in the blanks. Because that is exactly what I did by the end of the film, and there is a subtle brilliance to that. I'm giving the Persian version 3 stars.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, next week on Thanksgiving, I will be releasing my 100th episode of the show. It's a big show with some fantastic surprises to celebrate 100 episodes that really just snuck up on me. If you have a special message or even an audio recording you want to leave for the show, you can email comments or the audio recording to be read or listened to on the show by emailing themoviewireshow@gmail.com. Moving on to movies that are now available to rent, buy, or stream now. Make sure you check out my reviews on previous episodes for the following movies. Now available, There's No Point in Praying in When Evil Lurks, which is one of the best thought-provoking horror movies of the decade, receiving 3.5 stars. Based on the incredible true story, Break the Silence, Save the Children in The Sound of Freedom, which was an incredibly powerful film but leaned on the message more than the story. And this is a message that makes that okay. Sound of Freedom received 3 stars. Wall Street didn't see that coming in the true story about the GameStop stock pump, which didn't pump me up enough to only receive 2.5 stars. Death is Just the Beginning in A Haunting in Venice, which received 3 stars. And finally, Witness the Return of Jigsaw in Saw 10, which trapped me in its story, receiving 3 stars. Make sure you catch up on those reviews, and while you do, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe, and don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Now, before we get into the last set of reviews, I want to talk about a podcast that I am absolutely obsessed with. It's both sweet and spicy and naughty and nice, and that's the Milf and Me Podcast. Make sure you check out this incredible podcast. The link will be in the description of this episode. But let's hear from the Milf and Me now.
Face it, dating sucked in your 20s, gets worse in your 30s, and your 40s, forget it.
It's a cesspool out there, and we're your flotation device.
Join us weekly for saucy chat, ridiculous love gurus,
and MILF-worthy fun to spice up your life.
The Milf and Me Podcast. Every Wednesday on your favorite pod platform.
And the milfandmepod.com.
The Milf and Me Podcast.
Willa, played by Meg Ryan, and Bill, played by David Duchovny, are ex-lovers that will see each other for the first time in years when they both find themselves snowed in transit at an airport overnight. And what happens later?
I'm looking for my connection. We were rerouted through wherever it is we are.
Hello, Wilhelmina.
Hello, William.
How have you been?
Well, for the last 20 years.
25, maybe.
I've been 49 forever and ever and ever.
Wow, lucky you. I feel like I've been in my 50s since my 20s.
That's so true.
You don't have to agree with me.
Attention, Boston and Austin passengers. Those flights have been delayed until further notice.
Just those 2 flights?
Just us.
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
They're saying this could be bad. The storm of the century?
What are you worried about?
Everything. I was diagnosed with anticipatory anxiety.
Is that a real thing?
Oh, yeah. Right now, I'm worried that we're lost.
Look around.
We are looking around.
Look around.
I'm looking around.
Relax. You're already living out your worst case scenario.
What, being stuck here with you?
Yeah.
You make a good point.
What are you looking for in there?
Photos of the kids, the family. I know how badly you wanted that.
It just wasn't in the cards. Was that your daughter?
Yeah.
It really wasn't what you said, that we wanted different things. You left. You let go.
This behavior, this is exactly why we broke up.
So basically, my personality.
Okay, yes.
This is not at all how I imagine our reunion.
Oh, you imagine this?
When people break up, there's the thing that they tell each other, and then there's the truth that you never told me.
I was in love with you, and I couldn't turn that on and off like a switch.
I know.
Nighttime slows, raindrops splash rainbows.
Have you ever wondered what if?
Perhaps someone you know.
This facility will power down to essential function only.
Come on!
Come on! Is that a thing?
Oh, it's a thing.
Lying smiling in the dark, shooting stars around your heart.
Are you happy? It's not the one question we should really be asking each other.
Now you're crying in your sleep.
I have a good life, but I never again met anybody that made me feel the way you do.
Pure and simple. If love's the truth, then look no lies. Let me swim around your eyes. I found a place I'll never leave. Shut my mouth.
If we could see our memories in advance, would we do anything different?
Please don't ruin this.
Pure and simple, just for you.
Do you want to know what happens and what happens later? absolutely nothing. Meg Ryan stars, writes, and directs this film in her second directorial attempt, with the other being Ithaca from 2015. And this is also her return to a feature film since Ithaca, and before that, Serious Moonlight from 2009. But Ryan hasn't really had a memorable film since the early 2000s. Now, Meg Ryan attempts to adapt Stephen Ditz and Kurt Lynn's stage play called Shooting Star, but I find it hard to call this an adaptation because it feels so obvious that this is just a stage play with a higher budget and two actors that audiences are familiar and can connect with. Everything about what happens later feels like an actual stage play, from the minimal scene changes to the stiff and structured back and forth banter, to even an airport narrator voiced by Hal Liggett that pops in from now and then that we can tell was designed for an actual live audience, to get the audience to laugh or give lines of a symbolic nature that one would only find on a commercial stage play, to ensure that the audience doesn't miss any of the points, because when you're live, you can't hit rewind. But you know what? This didn't bug me that much, because this movie would have irritated me even more if I found myself having to rewind to ensure I caught the points correctly. So I am grateful that at least this part was kept simplistic. The film is as simplistic as the story of the stage play, and is treated as so. Its story, its execution, there's nothing to separate it from stage play to movie except there's no live audience. I can almost feel the way the movie started shooting. It must have taken like 2 days, if that. Meg Ryan sitting in the director's seat saying, here's your motivation. Exes meet at an airport after years of being apart, and action, keep rolling, don't stop till we finish this damn thing. And when it comes to the so-called adaptation, the dialogue is just so safe. For example, when Ryan and Duchovny first run into each other, it's like watching a company's HR video. It's professional, it's emotionless, and it's just completely stiff and unwanted. And I get it, this was the beginning of the movie. I can understand, I can wait for the character development, I can see where this movie goes. I can see if this actually turns into something interesting. But it never does. This is a play that was intending to be dialogue-driven, chemistry-driven, and to solve a conflict towards redemption. And the movie doesn't add anything to the table. It actually contradicts it. It's more effective as a stage play than it is a movie. But in fairness, it does finally reach a resolution. But by the time it does, I didn't care at all. I didn't care in the beginning, I didn't care in the middle, and I didn't care at the end. Somebody must have not told our cast that this was a movie, not a stage play, because the performances reminded me of being in the front row of a play. There is nothing to separate this movie from any originality to stand on its own. Now, Meg Ryan plays some sort of healer that carries a rain stick, and David Duchovny is a businessman. Now, these are obviously polar opposites that they describe during their meaningless conversations during the runtime. The chemistry is so completely bizarre along with each individual performance. Ryan and Duchovny perform each line like they are actually performing on a stage with a live audience, with elevated delivery to their bodies always facing forward. When I go to a play, I purposely never sit in the first front rows. I'm a mezzanine theater viewer kind of guy. I like to have a good distance to not see the flaws, to not see any of the hesitations from the performances. The problem we have with Ryan's direction is that she doesn't get the fact that when you're on a big screen, you have to treat the delivery different, because everybody in the theater with the big screen is technically in the front row of a live theater. This is the way we're viewing it. We have this big screen, we can see the flaws, we can see the overacting, we can see the amplified body language. When we have two familiar faces such as Ryan and Duchovny, I was utterly disappointed that these two both look like they are just miserable, and not as the movie intended as bad breakup exes. I felt no energy, no passion from any line they delivered. They might as well have just filmed a table read in front of a green screen and placed the setting in later and just called it a day. What Happens Later had an opportunity to have these fantastic two great performers to create their own spin, to loosen up and have an engaging conversation with a limited scene movie. But they are so tense from start to finish, I was having the most miserable time watching what was on screen. Dyson Lynn's play attempts to deep dive into lost love, regret, the changing of past, communication, miscommunication, and regret through two ex-lovers. And the points Ryan is trying to portray are just visually lazy. It just stays grounded, just like our stranded passengers. There is no interest, no intrigue to the conversation. There is no entertainment value. I was completely bored by the performances and dialogue that just seemed boring and segmented as someone listed off complaints of the workplace for 2 hours. And by the end of the film, the resolve is just so predictable and cliche that we saw coming from the first 10 minutes of the movie. I wish I could say I took something away from this film. I wish I could say I learned something. I wish I could remember one memorable line. but I can't. What Happens Later is nothing more than just a pure waste of time, and it tries to be way more intellectual than it is. But what a horrible, misguided direction by Meg Ryan. But I feel I have to give something positive from this movie, so let's give credit to, let's go with cinematographer Bartosz Nosek, because he makes this one setting look good. What Happens Later is a great title for this film because I was actually thinking of what I was going to do later while watching this movie, and that was laundry. I had a couple loads to do when I got home, and laundry seemed more entertaining than this film. I wish this movie's title would have had a question mark at the end of it. What happens later? That way I could have answered by saying a bad review. I'm giving What Happens Later 1 star. It gets so hard to keep track and even have time to read all the trending topics on the web. Now there's a new app to help with all of those problems. Newsly is an audio app for iOS and Android. It picks up web articles about the most trending topics on the web at any given moment and reads them to you in a natural human voice. For the first time in the history of the internet, the entire web becomes listenable. Browse articles from topics you choose and start playing. You can follow any topic as specific as you like, from sports, science, to Bitcoin. You can even follow Kardashian. It will find you the latest articles and read them to you out loud. And guess what? They have podcasts as well. Explore trending podcasts from over 50 countries. The Movie Wire is now a featured podcast on the Newsly app. Download and use Newsly for free now. The link will be in the description of this episode. You can also use one of my promo codes that you will find in the description as well to get you a 1-month free premium subscription. Stop scrolling, start listening, download Newsly today. When teenage Priscilla meets Elvis Presley, the man who's already a rock and roll superstar becomes someone entirely unexpected in private moments. A thrilling crush, an ally in loneliness, a vulnerable best friend in Priscilla.
Hi. What's your name?
Priscilla Boyer.
You like Elvis Presley?
Of course. Who doesn't?
What are the kids listening to these days?
Bobby Darin, Fabian, and you.
Just what is the intent here, Mr. Presley? You got women throwing themselves at you. Why my daughter?
Well, sir, I happen to be very fond of your daughter. She's much more mature than her age.
21!
What? 22. That's 22. You don't have to worry about it. Black hair and more eye makeup.
I don't know if I like it.
What do you mean you don't know if you like it?
He's not like you imagine. You know, there's a lot of rumors about you.
Was there something you're hiding?
I don't have a goddamn thing to hide. Oh, I need a woman who understands that things like this might happen. Are you gonna be here or not?
I want a life of my own.
Now, Priscilla might not be in your face, bright and shiny as Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, and thank God for that. It might not make Elvis the main focal point, and it doesn't tell us the same Elvis story that we all have known. Priscilla was actually inspired by the 1985 book Elvis and Me by Priscilla Presley, and it tells a story through Priscilla's eyes from when they first met in 1959 when Priscilla was 14 and Elvis was 24. The story of Priscilla follows these two from their first meeting all the way to their separation. You know, I was actually taken back a little bit by Priscilla, and I was pleasantly surprised. There's a level of respect I have for how brave this movie is. And when I say brave, it takes everything we expect from the rise and fall story of a famous figure that we see time over time, from their own destruction of the temptation of power, overconfidence, and money. It turns the tables and it focuses on the loved ones surrounding Elvis Presley and the impact that his behavior had on those individuals. We have had numerous documentaries, TV films, full-length motion pictures, to even Baz Luhrmann's vision that took the angle of the Colonel to justify the immense pressure put on Elvis to perform, to portray the reason of why Elvis grew to the fate that led to his death. Priscilla takes on the opposite angle that we've seen from films past. We don't have a huge focus on Elvis per se, we have a focus on his inner circle, his life outside of the spotlight, his intimate settings. And this is what makes this film truly brave. It takes everything that we know and it teaches us something new, something that we may not even wanted to know, but we are intrigued by what's happening on screen. But what makes Priscilla truly brave is the amount of ugly themes and topics it tries to portray, but in a subtle way. From the impact of fame, power, overconfidence, to even an attempt at dominance over loved ones using their power as reasoning to subdue the love they're willing to provide, and leaning on the mental state of worry as a threat to losing the life the other one was raised in based on the lifestyle the other provided. Priscilla is the most subtle piece of emotion of the year, not because it makes us cry by the end of the film, because it doesn't try to. It doesn't fill the film with added emotional dialogue to gain an emotional reaction. It doesn't care about that. It just simply wants to show a point of view opposite of that of our famed icon, and actually becomes more of a curious character study than just a telling of a story. As a matter of fact, Priscilla played brilliantly by Kaylee Spaney, who holds a poker face almost the entire movie. And we have to remember that Priscilla, given her age at the time she met Elvis, was almost introduced to an extent raised by her king of rock and roll. She didn't have a normal life of a teenager. She wasn't allowed to have the same emotions as a teenager. The film makes you follow Priscilla as she goes through the emotions, but we have to interpret the emotions a lot of the time. The brave thing that our writers Sofia Coppola and Sandra Harmon do to adapt Priscilla's story is ensure the screenplay as well as the performances allow the viewer to show some empathy during Priscilla's time with Elvis, without having to force feed us elevated dialogue. This strategy doesn't force us to shed a tear, we don't have an overblown emotional reaction, and it doesn't try to attempt to get one from the viewer. It merely shows the numbness of how one grows to accept a complacent relationship, and how one just accepts their own fate of what they're told from the one they love, especially at such a young age. It's the power of dominance in a complicated and almost an abusive relationship. Now, our Elvis, played by Jacob Elordi, gives a more subtle performance than we got from Austin Butler and Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, mainly due to the fact that the movie steers away from showing us showbiz Elvis, but rather what happens after showbiz Elvis. Most of the screen time with Elvis is at his home in Graceland, where he's interacting with his family and Priscilla. It's a more intimate performance, and it works perfectly for more of an intimate setting of Priscilla and Elvis's home life and relationship. Both Elordi and Spenny give a unique, controlled, and memorable performance here. These performances stuck with me well after the movie was over. They don't shout at the camera with emotion, they don't sob, they don't give any long speeches, but yet their performances just stay with you. It's almost hypnotic how these performances roll on screen. Now, at times I feel the adapted screenplay could have gone more into depth with the conversations between Priscilla and Elvis to give more of a comprehensible understanding of the state of their relationship. But instead, the movie sticks to its subtle hints of what's going on. And I can respect Sofia Coppola for not changing the course to keep that intimate tone of uncertainty within our couple. Coppola really does flex her director's muscles and had a clear vision of how she wanted this movie to play out from start to finish, without steering off course. I can even tell she had a clear vision of how she wanted the technical aspects to really support these characters, even down, for example, the musical composition. Here we don't have a lot of Elvis's music, we get a snippet from here to there, but it's mere seconds long. Instead, we get this mesmerizing lo-fi, almost a hum integration in its place, where it not only contradicts Elvis's music, but matches Priscilla's tone to represent her mental state. The music by Phoenix and Sons of Raphael fit and complement our characters to a T, and it just all blends together to help support our characters' actions, body language, and really utilizes the music, the art of language in times of silence. Now, the film does have some minor flaws, and these noticeable flaws I have with Priscilla is the mere fact it does fall into a rush climax where it feels the need to rush through some key elements that could have put a bow on our progression of Priscilla at an hour and 50 minutes. It really did need another 20 minutes or so to really tie this movie together. I remember looking at my watch around an hour and 40 minutes, and I was wondering how they were going to wrap this thing up in the next 10 minutes. And I was disappointed that we got into a rushed climax. Priscilla is Sofia Coppola's most risky, bold, and bravest movie to date. And if anybody could have pulled this movie off, it would have been Coppola. She would have come at top of mind. Priscilla flows with a mesmerizing pace and a hypnotic tone. Those that do buy a ticket to Priscilla or view it at home and are expecting to see another Elvis biopic with toe-tapping music, this movie will disappoint you. This movie's not that. It takes the Elvis fun factor and flips it to a true focus on the surrounding characters in Elvis's life. Is Priscilla an entertaining, toe-tapping, and feel-good picture? Absolutely not. Will I see it again? Probably not, but that's not because it's bad, but because the character stayed with me well after the movie was done. It was a good first-time view, and I don't want to go back to revisit it because the characters are perfect. Priscilla is a contradiction of itself as one of the most subtle but memorable movies of the year. I'm giving Priscilla 3.5 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. I also want to say thank you to Dan over at Casting Views for providing such an incredibly well-done soundbite for our Marvels review. You've been an incredible support. Speaking of support, you can also support this show by following me on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, Thread, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Next week on Thanksgiving, I will bring you a whole brand new set of reviews for our 100th episode. Until next week, do me a favor, make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film, and support your local movie theaters.
A verdict has been made on this episode of The Movie Wire by your host, Justin Henson. He thanks you for listening to the show. You can follow Justin on Instagram and Twitter at MovieWireShow or visit his website, www.themoviewire.com. Oh, and don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcast and Spotify. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we will see you at the movies.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.